Welcome, everybody. I'm Allison Paul. I'm the co-president of GPLH, and we have many co-presidents or past presidents with us. And my co-president, I don't see on the screen right now, but Deborah is co-president. All right, and Maureen is the incoming co-president as I step gracefully down December 31st. So welcome, everyone. We'd love to see your name. If anybody isn't named or their organization, please do so. We encourage you to message each other if you want to make any connections. This is in lieu of meeting in person. This is your chance to kind of meet and network if you're interested in doing so. So if you want to add your organization or your field that you work in so that perhaps people can do a little informal networking, we encourage you to do that. I want to thank our sponsors, one of whom is here, Choice Words, Steve Densmore. We're so grateful and appreciative of your sponsorship. Other sponsors are the United Way of Westchester and Putnam, and Jeffrey is here, so you can wave. So shout out to United Way as well. We're very appreciative. And Nonprofit Westchester. We also have new consultant sponsors. So if you are a consultant, we welcome you to be a consultant sponsor, and we have several here today as well. So thank you all. It helps make our programs possible and mostly pay for our wild apricot, who's raised the fees a lot. A couple of other announcements. December 13th, Joanne Stewart, who I see on the call, is going to lead a session on the new Impact 100 Westchester grant application. If you don't know, they've gone from an LOI and a full application to one to try to make it easier and less tedious for nonprofits. So Joanne will lead a session looking at the new application, 8:30 December 13th. And our members only next connections call is December 14th at 8:30. It's members only. We talk, we help each other. We truly are an amazingly collegial and helpful group. So join, and you can be part of those conversations. And you really should join because our rates are going up to all of $100, which is still pretty damn inexpensive, January 1st. So if you join in December and you're not a member, it's only $85. All right. We're going to send a survey after the event, which I would love if you would take. It helps us know if we're on the right track. And in addition to stepping down from being co-president, I'm stepping off the program committee. So I heard someone say that this topic really interested them. If there's topics you're interested in, if you want to weigh in and be part of the program committee, we truly welcome you. We're ready for some new ideas. Other committees that are welcoming people are membership. More people on membership, we can do some nice outreach and just greet some of the new people that are members. So please consider joining a committee. And if you want to even join the board, happy to talk to you. You can email info.gplh@gmail.com. All right. You will all get the recording afterwards, and we can get GPCI credit for this event. I'm going to do a quick poll, and then I'll do the introductions to our speakers. So let's see who's using AI. Can you see it? Do you see the poll? Yeah. So let's take a moment and do this, and this will be nice, I think, for our panelists to sort of see who's in the room. All right. We're just about there. So I'm going to end the poll. Last chance. 43, 35, 9, and 17. All right, we got that? And I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then Philip, you can see how this relates to other meetings you've been in. I know you were mentioning that. So, oh, someone had a last entry. Okay. All right. I am so happy to have this event. We tried to do timely events, and certainly AI has hit the world like a storm. We've brought together three terrific people to talk with us. Afua Bruce, if you would just wave, is a leading public interest technologist. And she has a consulting business and helps organizations develop and implement responsible data and technology. She's a computer software engineer. And when we talked, I didn't tell you that I'm from Indiana. I know you got a degree from Purdue University, and my dad even taught there for a while. So she is a computer scientist with training in data science and artificial intelligence. She's an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon, an affiliate at Harvard Kennedy School of Berkman Klein Center. She's written books about technology and change, and has a lot of great experience. So I'm very glad to have that perspective with us today. Philip Den, some of you might have attended some of his webinars already, is the CEO of Grant Table, which is here, or he designed to be helpful for the grant writing world. It's all powered by AI, Grant Table, and he devised the prototype from 15 years of experience working with grant-funded organizations in the nonprofit sector around the world. So he's bringing a lot of experience to us. And then Margit, who's actually a member of GPLH, and we're happy to have you as a member. And some of you might have seen her, attended some of her many webinars through her company, Grants for Good. She and her team have written many grants, federal, state, foundation, and corporation. So she has that perspective of being the grant seeker. And now she's also worked for a foundation. Now she's putting her emphasis more into public speaking, training, and teaching. And she's done marvelous workshops and has explored AI a lot, and will bring that knowledge to us. So I think we're ready to go. I'm going to ask the speakers to unmute. I'm going to ask everybody else to mute, and we'll get going. All right. Welcome again, everybody. So let's start by, well, actually, let's look quickly at our poll results. So Philip, since you were mentioning during the minutes before we started, how does our usage compare to other of the many workshops you've been in?
It's looking better than some of the polls that I've seen. The standard averages that I've kind of got in my head from, say, 2023, speaking to different groups, I would say it would ordinarily be, well, this has a slightly, I would say 10% generally have incorporated into their work. Then 20% would be the next two that dipped my toe and I use an AI platform. And then oftentimes 70% in the not at all category. So this is actually trending towards more people having used AI.
Okay. All right. Well, then AI, let's get into it. Let's talk first, for those who haven't dipped their toe in, let's talk about what it is and what it isn't. And I'm going to ask Philip and then Afua just to talk about what it is. I know there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is. So let's start with that.
Okay, going before Afua is kind of a scary spot to be, but I'll do my best to lead off, and then I'll let the real expert clean it up for me. In my experience, I think what I think the consensus is that there is no consensus, that AI is sort of a term that shifts depending on who's using it, depending on what we're talking about. But the description that I like the best is technology or machines that we've built to be smart in the same way people are. So there are all kinds of different artificial intelligences, and we interact with it most days of our lives if we're using things like video streaming, where you have a recommendation engine that's studying the patterns in your viewing and then trying to figure out what you might want to watch next. Same thing with music or online shopping. So that's the definition that that I tend to start with, and I like to start there just so that people don't zoom in too far and assume that AI is only ChatGPT or some kind of robot or some kind of entity that is too specific. I think it's almost more of a field or a pursuit than a particular tool.
All right, and we'll jump to Afua. Let's jump into to help people understand what it is.
Absolutely. I would echo everything Philip said. AI is a term that covers many different types of technology tools and methodologies. It is all encompassing. I like to think of it most though as algorithms that process data to predict or produce new information. So if you think about the things that you do on a daily basis, as Philip mentioned, watching movies, it was just Black Friday, Cyber Monday, if you did online shopping and you wanted something to predict what you might like to buy or might like to purchase, if in your day-to-day job you are looking at wanting to process a bunch of accounts payable information, for example, and predict where you might be most vulnerable to audit risk, those are the types of things that AI can really help with. I think, as Philip also mentioned, AI is more than ChatGPT. Generative AI is fairly new in a way that it is broadly accessible. That is where AI tools can help generate new content, new text, new images, and more. So that's also a way to use AI. But overall, AI comes down to a bunch of statistical predictions that can help simplify the ways that we live our lives.
Let's just talk a little bit more about the predictions, right? Let's just expand on what that means for people.
Sure. So
machine learning and prediction.
Machine learning and prediction. So if you think about if I am talking to a child and wanting a child to help distinguish or to be able to help a child identify if something is a cat or a dog, I might show one picture and say, this is a cat. And it's a very basic, clip art image of a cat, and here's another cat, here's another cat, here's another cat. After some time, the child would understand that a cat, has mostly pointed ears, some whiskers, 4 legs, a longish tail. And they'll be able to say, this is a cat. If I then showed an image of a dog, they'll say, that's not a cat. And we can go back and forth that way. If I show the child then an image of something like a raccoon, he could get a little confused, but maybe more often than not, we'll be able to say, well, that's not a cat because of these reasons. So AI is similar in that you give AI a lot of different information, and over time, AI and machine learning, you give it a lot of information, and through that training process that happens in the background, it's able to say, with a pretty high level of certainty, depending on the tool, this is a cat or this is not a cat. So when you think about it in terms of what predictions look like in something like a ChatGPT, you may give an AI tool a phrase of, tell me what food is the best in the US, and it'll look at all of its information and figure out that you said food, US, best, and it'll run all of the calculations in the background to say pizza from, pepperoni pizza from whatever restaurant is the best in the US based on its analysis of the information. So when we say predictions, it's looking at a lot of that data, matching it with the words that have been given to it, and generating and predicting sort of what the next likely response is.
Thank you. And now let's jump to misconceptions. I know, Phil, you and I talked a lot about that, people's misconceptions.
Can you grab the last can you grab the laundry? Can you
All right,
pick
I'm
up
gonna,
the
please mute yourselves. I'm gonna go in there. I thought, all right.
up in the wash? I'm gonna do the blanket separately, so don't
Please,
put
please
that in
mute
here.
yourself. I'm trying to mute people. Who's that? Who's that not muted?
Well,
Whoops. Oops. There, sorry. I'm trying to go
that's
down.
okay.
Got the wrong one. Okay, go ahead, Philip. Sorry about that.
Um, I'm gonna start answering this from one particular misconception that I've been trying to highlight a bit, which is I actually think what Afua just described in terms of the algorithms, the probabilities, the statistics that are at work in many AI systems. I think one of the things that we need now as a society is a slightly different mental model about what's happening when we interact with this type of software. And one of the misconceptions that I'm seeing is that we have all built up this kind of intuitive sense of how software works over the last many decades. And that's basically you've got a lot of times the data, you've got code that tells, that has kind of an action and reaction programming there. And then you've got the interface, and that's consistent for a Game Boy, that's consistent for a word processor or an email. You strike a key and a thing happens. You click another thing and another thing happens. And it's manipulating your data or the data in the system. And more or less, that is actually common to a lot of the software that we have used for many decades now across our lives. What's different now is when you interact with a generative system, in particular, generative AI. So we're talking about ChatGPT or the new image generators or audio generators. You're, as Afua mentioned, you're typing in a string of text, a sentence, and that's all getting broken down into numbers and mathematics, probabilities. And then it's going into this very complex algorithm that these companies have tuned that is going to predict each next word or each next pixel or each next thing in a series based on that math, based on that statistical analysis that was done in the training, that was created in the training. And then it will just return to you a result. So it's really different in terms of what's happening there. And one of the misconceptions that I've seen is that people think that when they are talking to ChatGPT and asking it a question like, what is the best food in the US? And it's going and searching through some kind of database, the way that say Google is searching the internet, or you're looking through your computer for best food in the US, and then it's finding and citing and taking something and bringing it to you. That's not what's happening. That's what has happened with software for decades now. Yes, exactly that process. I asked for something and a thing is brought back to me. A whole new thing is happening now. That algorithm is generating a response based on probability, based on mathematics and statistics. So it's not referencing anything. And so I think one of the things that we need to start to separate, and I'm finding is causing a lot of misconception, is literally the difference between a Google search and an app, the exact same thing to ChatGPT. You will get confident answers back in both cases, but Google has actually gone out and sort of tried to find real world data, whereas a generative system is generating. You're interacting with a mathematical equation for an algorithm, and you're not interacting with a database anymore. And there's a lot more that we don't understand in terms of how that result is being generated, Whereas if you're interacting with more traditional software, you can see how the code works. You can see why a particular action and result occurred. So I think the misconception there is just a result of how new this kind of software is, that we're really just interacting with a mathematical equation. But I'll ask Afua to probably check my work there, and there are many other misconceptions, but that's one I'm encountering a lot, and it's leading to a lot of people asking things like, you know, where is my data? What happens to my data? Is this training the model? All that kind of stuff. So a lot of newness here, I think, is what I've been seeing.
All right, Afua, over to you with misconceptions. Thank you, Philip.
Yeah, I think what Philip outlaid is really, really important, that it does work fundamentally different. And so if you have heard of things like hallucinations, or why a generative AI tool might get something completely wrong, whether that's you put into Chat GPT. I played around with Chat GPT a couple of weeks ago to ask it to write a children's story that took place in Ghana, and it gave me this beautiful story about how the Ghanaian children went, out in the city of Accra to see the giraffes. Ghana doesn't have giraffes, and certainly not in Accra. It's another part of Africa, but close enough statistically, according to Chat GPT. Or if you've seen on Twitter or Instagram lately, a lot of trends of give us some words into Mid-Journey and we'll create an image of, I don't know, an elephant, and then make it sillier and make it sillier and make it sillier. And it's something that's completely unrealistic. That's sort of why you get that, because it's generating new information. I think another big misconception around AI is that, is tied to that, is that it is infallible. And so because it's generated by a lot of, or at least it's programmed initially by, people who really know what they're talking about, we should be able to trust it. I think, as we've described, it is generating things statistically, and sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it isn't accurate. I think another misconception, though, also is that all types of AI are the same and all types of AI have the same level of risk. AI itself has been around as a field for about 40 or 50 years. There are many ways that small AI algorithms, not even small, but AI algorithms are used in a variety of ways already. Again, we've talked about sort of some recommendation algorithms for those of you who use social media, or even different, facial recognition tools to be able to unlock your phone and the like. So some of the AI technologies have been around for a while and have various levels of, we can attach various confidence levels essentially in the different tools. So I think that's important to remember as well. And then I think the third misconception I see sort of on the other end of AI is perfect is that all AI is bad and there's no ethical way to use AI as well. So I also don't think that is true. There are, again, many, many years of research as to how to mitigate both in the design of AI tools, but also in the use. What types of things should you be thinking about to have a human in the loop, or even to reframe it a little bit more to say, to have AI in the loop of your decision making. So I think those would be the three misconceptions that I'd identify.
All right, thank you. I want to, because we're going to focus a little bit on ethics and how to use it responsibly, but I want to bring Margit into the conversation, and let's switch and talk about what is it good for within the grant writing world.
I'd be glad to talk about that. Hi, everybody. I'm Margit Browsda-Poirier, and I'm based in Rochester, New York. So I'm kind of your neighbor, but several hours drive away. So it's great to be meeting this group to talk to you. So I've really focused on all of the issues we've been talking about so far, but within the context specifically of how AI can be useful, a helpful tool for nonprofits, especially in the realm of grant writing and fundraising, the broader realm of fundraising. Because in the 15 years of running my consulting company, Grants for Good, I have heard the number one challenge from nonprofits is lack of staff and time. And so suddenly in the last year, here comes a tool that addresses the two biggest concerns that I've heard from nonprofits: lack of staff, lack of time to do the grant writing, to do the fundraising. So it's been, because I'm just naturally curious, and I was definitely a math geek in high school and beyond, still am. I want to see what we can do with technology. And so I've been working a lot with ChatGPT. I've been an alpha tester for various platforms. I've used Philip Dang's amazing platform called Grantable. Check that out. I've also worked with Google Bard, and they're all just a little bit different. You'll get different responses, even entering in the exact same prompts into some of these platforms. So what I encourage people to get started is pick one. You know, if you want to start with a free platform like ChatGPT or Google Bard, or both, in my case, do it, and you can start to use it. What I think it's good for is what I said earlier. It's a time saver. It can serve as an assistant. So no, it isn't like hiring a new staff person, but it can serve as your virtual assistant, so to speak. So let's give an example. What if you're creating a letter of inquiry to a brand new foundation that has never heard of your cause or your nonprofit organization, and you want to introduce yourself? You can have ChatGPT generate that in about 3 to 5 seconds at the most. I've done this. And what you need to do, and there's a role for you, because these tools don't replace you at all, because what you're going to be entering is the prompt. So the prompt is essentially what you want it to do and how. So to stay with the same example, with a letter of inquiry, I would add a prompt that says, and I always start with please, because I still think I'm talking to a person. I know I'm not, but it's something about how I was raised. I'll say, please write a 1-page letter of inquiry to the Farish Foundation, explaining the mission of the food so-and-so food bank located in Rochester, New York, period. We serve about 3,000 people each year that are living at or below poverty level. And then you get the picture. I would add a few sentences about what we do. It's as if I'm talking to a person saying, here's what we do, but I want this AI platform to generate my letter for me, so I don't have to spend the 20, 30 minutes writing it. And then I click that return or submit button, and it comes up with something very quickly. The next step is really critical. Read what was generated and edit, so that it comes from your authentic voice, so that it is truly accurate. And then you can copy paste it into your letterhead. There's your letter, it's done. And so it's great when you've got a writer's block, or you just don't feel like sitting down and writing something. I can give lots of examples, but I'll stop there for now, because I know you were asking about some of the benefits. So in terms of the bigger picture, I look at it as a time saver and as an assistant, addressing two of the biggest problems that nonprofit organizations express.
All right, thank you. And towards the end, we're going to maybe ask you some other prompts, and we'll get into some of that granular stuff. But so we've talked about what it is, some misconceptions, what it can be good for us as grant writers. With this panel, I do want to spend time talking about some of the ethical considerations, some of the risks, causes of concern. So I'm going to bounce back to Afua first. What should we be concerned about? How should we be thinking about this? We've heard about the existential crisis. So relating to us as grant writers, not the whole big world existential crisis, but what should we be concerned about, or what are some of the downsides or risks for us? And let's talk about hallucinations and make sure everybody knows what that means.
Absolutely. So I'll start with that first definition, because I'm now realizing I used the term hallucinations earlier, but did not define it. So my apologies. And so a hallucination is when you give an AI tool, particularly a generative AI tool such as ChatGPT. Microsoft, I think, really recently launched its Copilot. Google's Bard, any of those tools, you give it a prompt and you ask it a specific question and it responds back confidently. And it is also wrong, but you don't understand that initially unless you do some of those verifications. So I like to compare this to, I used to teach a bunch of 4 and 5-year-olds Sunday school and lots of STEM related camps. And sometimes you would ask them, like, what did we talk about last week? And they would say, like, science. And it was like, great, what about science? And it would be gravity, because that's the only term they remembered. It was like, well, we talked about gravity a month ago, not last week. But they were confident in their response. That's what AI can be like sometimes. That's specifically what the hallucinations are, is when it gives you that response, but it is also inaccurate because of the probabilities used to generate that Philip described earlier. So when thinking about some of the ethical considerations for adopting AI tools, some things that you want to think about are what your organization's own organization's own values are. All conversations about technology really come back to what are the values that you're building around. And so that is important because that will determine what data you let your AI tools have access to. Do you share data with everyone? Do you hold data in certain places? What's the security look like? Who do you want to have access to that data, both for you to run your reports today, but also for the broader world, right? ChatGPT pulls everything from the internet. You might want to have an instance that's only pulling from your direct information. So I think that's one risk. Another risk or another ethical concern to think about is what it means to use these tools to help you, right? There is a version of the world where you can use the text generative tools to, as Margit mentioned, to completely write a letter for you without you really touching on it at all, without you doing more than a couple of words of edits. So that's one way to use those tools. Another way is to, as you're thinking about writing a proposal, use a generative AI tool really as a sounding board, as something to help you think about the questions in new ways, to use, and I think this is an application of Microsoft's Copilot where it can read PDFs. And so I'm working with a nonprofit now that has a lot of academic researchers, and it gives this tool a lot of PDFs about what they do, and it spits out, here are some summaries. And so to what extent you use that, and then you were to lift that and submit it in an application as your own work, I think is an ethical consideration for you to think about. I think that use is different from the let me play around with this and use this as to what are different ways I could restate this information, or how do I think about making my language more clear or more clear or more succinct or punchier. How do you do things like that? Google also has a tool, I think it's called TextFX, for writers and copywriters. Actually developed it in coordination with Lupe Fiasco, the writer. And so it has a lot of tools for generating similes or generating other words, other contexts, other metaphors, and things like that. And so I think for me, especially when working in the nonprofit space, ways that you use AI as something to open up your mind and really as something that helps you more creatively brainstorm, I think gets away from some of the ethical concerns of completely outsourcing your work to a machine. But that's another question that a lot of people think about. It is also one that a lot of foundations are starting to ask for and have boxes to check for you to indicate to what level, or if at all, you used AI to generate your submissions. And so, reading the fine print of those application forms is going to be really important and can affect where you decide to use AI or not. I think the third thing that I think about also is what your community both looks like and sort of what your community standards are. Some AI tools, because of how they're trained, reflect a lot of bias in socioeconomic status and race and more. And so doing a bit of due diligence on some of the tools that you're using to see, does this even make sense for our population? Or does this make sense for who our population serves. For example, I worked with one nonprofit earlier this year. Their policy was that they don't use any type of video AI tool, any generative AI tool. They work with a lot of artists. They said there's no way that you can use a generative AI tool in a way that is respectful of artist content, since people that those tools are trained on aren't compensated for their work and may not have given consent for their work to be used. And so their policy of that organization is we don't use any of these tools because we support the artist community, and we can't use a tool in our work that we think is taking advantage of our population. So I think those are some of the ethical concerns to be thinking about.
Thank you. That was a lot. And Philip, I want to give you a chance to respond, and I do want to dig deeper into bias and perpetuating inequities and how we need to be aware of that. So maybe start with that, and then anything else you want to add to risk causes of concern.
Yeah. So I think Afua sort of alluded to this when it comes back full circle to how these models are created. You know, massive amounts of data go into these systems, and then the computer scientists refine the process of teasing out the patterns. And think about the patterns, and those probabilities are what allow you to get these results. But that initial data, you know, in terms of who or what is represented in that data, that's sort of your first level of where bias can creep in. So, you know, there are all kinds of different studies where, say, facial recognition software has really been predominantly trained on the faces of white people. And so it's not as accurate in detecting or recognizing faces from people that are not white. So that's just a pretty basic example that I think all of us can kind of imagine happening. But then the next level, where the people come in and are tuning and refining, doing the actual algorithm design refinement, those people still bring their perspective and their experience into that process. So there's actually another layer where a particular viewpoint or perspective can become dominant at the expense or exclusion of other viewpoints. So that's another layer. And then I think at the end, what we're seeing now, say with ChatGPT, is that once the models are in operation, you have teams that are trying to do moderation and sort of limiting what the models will do and produce. So, you know, ChatGPT has fairly stringent guardrails there. Like, you can't get it to, you know, produce erotica, for example. Like, that's something that they have put as a guardrail and is sort of an editorial decision. So not that I think that's bad. I'm just saying that that's sort of the third level that I see in terms of how bias typically can come in. And that's really to say, for all of us to start becoming aware of how these models are constructed, what we're really interacting with. I think one of the things that I've been pushing back against in the nonprofit sector is we have this reputation or stereotype of being not as tech savvy. And I kind of want to reject that, just starting out, and to actually bring the nonprofit sector folks that I'm talking with, bring them in a little bit and say, let's get a bit technical. Let's understand, what is this machine that we're working with? How does it work? Because my theory is, with that understanding, we can get more value out of the tools, but also be better at avoiding new kinds of hazards, or, you know, unintentionally amplifying bias or inequity, because we don't understand what these models are doing. So I think just my main takeaway for this question is, if you feel yourself even saying, oh, well, I don't really know technology, I'm not a techie person, try to catch yourself saying that and kind of lean in or go in the opposite direction and say, well, let me just take my technology. I'm not a techie person. try to catch yourself saying that.
Whoops. He's frozen. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully he'll come back in, but
I'd like to just add, Philip and Afua have covered the risks on equity and bias so well. And I'm not going to add to those because they've covered it very well. We could talk further about it, but I want to just highlight one benefit along those lines, and that is if you are someone with English as a second language, writing a grant application or letters can be extremely difficult. You can be very ridden with anxiety. It might take hours to put together a good document. And so AI is going to be useful, already is, for people who do struggle with English as a second language. It's also been useful for some of the nonprofits that I've spoken with that are very small, where they don't have a grant writing staff. They cannot afford to hire an outside grant writer. And their writing might not be their strong point. Maybe public speaking is, maybe talking to funders is, but writing is not. And so now we've got this leveling of the playing field to some extent between the large nonprofits that can afford the staff, the smaller ones, grassroots ones who cannot, between people that are extremely exceptional in writing versus those who are really just learning English. And I find that this may help in some instances. I work with a lot of organizations that are addressing equity issues, and this is their first foray into grant writing. And so AI, many of them are using AI and they're saying, look, this is helping us a lot because we don't have the staff and the time. So I hope Philip gets back here soon, but
Yes,
I
yes,
did want to point out some of that. Great.
thank you. That's
Sorry.
good. Reducing inequities by in that way is great. So Philip, we welcome back. You were in the middle.
Well, no, maybe Zoom was kind of pulling me off the stage because it just quit unexpectedly. So maybe that was just the timing. So we'll leave it there. Maybe that was
All right. Then you know, time is ticking. I want to just quickly, Afua, you mentioned something about that made me think of plagiarism. How do we do attributions? How do we move forward? What's the ethical thing to do if we do get data that, you know, we use it for brainstorm when we get this great stuff back? How do we attribute that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one there is no currently consensus on how to attribute things created by a generative AI tool. There's no current legal precedence as to how you should cite an AI tool. I've seen it done in a variety of different ways. Although there is no sort of law or regulation around it, I would say I think the prevailing thought, though, is if something is wholly produced by a generative AI tool, you should acknowledge that it was wholly produced by such a tool. If you're using it, and so that's if you were to give it one prompt and, you know, just copy and paste into your submission form. For example, you copy and paste from what the tool spits out into whatever submission form you're using. I think it's generally assumed that you should acknowledge there that an AI tool was used. If you use it for more of the brainstorming or refining, I think it's a lot less clear. I think a lot of people don't see the need to acknowledge or attribute things to an AI tool if you used it to refine your work, to do some brainstorming, to do some creative restructuring. You don't see it that way. But there's no law, there's no generally accepted policy, but that's those sort of two ends of the spectrum are what I'm seeing with the folks that I'm speaking with.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that, on plagiarism? Yes, Philip.
I this is sort of a speculation, but what I kind of expect is going to happen is that many of the standard software tools that we use are going to start getting GPT-like or generative abilities kind of infused into different functions. And so you're not even going to necessarily need to type out a prompt. It's just going to, basically what I mean is I think the AI assistant is going to become much more granular. It's going to diffuse throughout your work to the point where it's going to be very difficult to separate out what the person has done and what the AI has done. So I think where we will end up is where what Afua just mentioned, wholly created, totally AI generated stuff. I hope we actually have policy in place that says you need to say that this is artificial imagery. Anytime that you're representing an identity, whether it's like a news outlet or an individual person, or kind of doing a sort of a mock-up or a rendering of a situation, and it's totally fictional. I think we're going to need some standards there to say this is AI generated. But what I would expect is that for us, when we're working, when we're writing or doing different types of creative activities, I think these software companies are going to add AI into almost every keystroke or click. And it will be really difficult to say. You may end up just putting a blanket statement that kind of says this was produced with AI assistance, or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be like a citation where like you look in your footnote and say this was AI, this was AI, this was AI. I think that's just going to become overwhelming.
And just building on that, Philip, to your point, this is how Grammarly works today, or they're plugins for Gmail as well as Outlook to do the same thing today. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I know people I've spoken with are cautious about their own data privacy. Is AI taking my data and using it for nefarious purposes? And so one of the cautions I use and tell people about when they're doing something like the letter of inquiry that I spoke about, or writing a portion of a grant application, is don't put in prompts that give away information that you wouldn't tell your coworker. Don't mention donor data that is private. Don't put that into the prompt. But the letter of inquiry example I gave really didn't have anything that I wouldn't have told someone about. You're basically saying, here's our mission, here's who we serve, here's the work we do. That's something you want to get the word out. But things like donor data or anything else that's private, I wouldn't put that into a prompt.
What else would you not do? Intellectual property. I mean, yes, donor data. Is there anything else that we should have guardrails about with our intellectual property or our data privacy? Anybody want to speak about? Any other guardrails you think, if we are dipping our toe in, we should be concerned about sharing with AI?
I just say to emphasize what Marguerite said, donor data, absolutely. But anything you would not put on the front page of your organization's website should not go into a prompt. So if that's any type of access information, anything that you wouldn't put on that front page, I wouldn't use as a prompt in AI tool.
I will also kind of add, one of the things that I think is going to happen is that the models, like the GPT is the most famous, or GPT-4. Google just came out yesterday with their competitor called Gemini. Facebook is just tossing technology out into the world without any sort of regard for what might happen, because that's their style. And Facebook in particular, they're releasing smaller models. And one of the things that I expect to happen is, right now it's only these massive multi-billion-dollar companies that can host these AI models. What I expect in the months and years to come is that the models will shrink, and it will start to be that anyone can have a model hosted on their own. And they'll be able to stand up a website, a software or a tool that looks like it does something really great that's useful for you. And it's AI, it's all that. And one of the things that I think is going to be really important for all of us is to kind of, it's like a nutrition facts, or knowing who's making your software. I think it's going to be really important to know basically the train of data there. Who is producing this AI model that a particular company is using, and then who is behind the company and the tool that you might be using. So moral of the story is, I think almost everyone, almost to an individual level, at some point is going to be able to have an AI model or an AI agent that is as powerful as GPT-4 is, or much more so. On your phone, I think will soon, come standard, you'll have your own, little AI assistant. People are going to be able to create what right now only a few companies can. But what that's going to mean is we're really going to have to understand who are we interacting with in terms of the software that we use. Right now, it's just the big players. We can be actually, reasonably confident that there's safety and thought involved. But at some point, I think, you're really going to have to look at a particular software or service and figure out who they are, where they are, and what is the combination of technology they're using to deliver the tool to you.
How do we evaluate that? What do we look for?
I think there are initiatives out there that are trying to come together and establish standards and policies. I think Afua is probably more able to speak to this from like a governmental background that she holds. But what I would hope to see is that there are certifications, there are standards. I mean, it's the same thing that, when you go to the grocery store now and you buy something from off the shelf, we all do that without questioning whether or not we're going to get sick, because there are these standards that food producers have to go through in order to bring their product to market. So, it may be more difficult to enforce that on the internet, but if a company chooses to go through a process of verifying that their security and data protocols are up to a given standard, and then have that as like an emblem or a way that people can recognize, I'm hopeful things like that will emerge that will encourage people to figure that out. But this is absolutely kind of at the frontier in terms of the fact that this kind of power is shrinking down in size and then diffusing out into the world so that anybody can really take it and do what they will. I think that's why we really need a healthy regulatory environment here, and some kind of public response that the nonprofit sector can play a huge role in, because I think we lead in terms of ethics and responsibility.
I'll just plus one to everything Philip said, especially the future, I think, of generative AI tools is smaller, not everything for everyone, but if you think about your friend circle, for example, you probably go to one friend to talk about money, another friend to talk about whatever. We're going to use our AI tools similarly, I hope. Also on the need for regulation in this space, it both being lacking, but some progress being made. The president issued an executive order at the end of October that gave a lot of guidance as to that directed government agencies to start exploring how to assess all AI tools and things like that. So we're seeing progress, movement in that space, I would say, and I hope to see more of it. I have a lot more of it, and from movement to progress and actual impact. I also just put into the chat a link to the Technology Association of Grant Makers AI framework for philanthropy. So this is an effort led by TAG. For those of you who are familiar, I was on the design committee for this, and this was published just yesterday, so it's fresh off the presses, but is shared with and was developed in collaboration. We had sessions to 300 people, most of whom from philanthropy, as well as practitioners, as to what does it look like to have an ethical framework around using AI for philanthropy. And so I know, since many of you are grant writers writing to this space, that framework may be of interest to you. I know we're up at the top of the hour, so I also want to pass to Margit if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, and I'd love, Margit, if you would also, just to keep it very grounded, a couple of other useful prompts to share as people maybe are inspired to get started.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. And I love that there are resources here in the chat. And Allison, I'm hoping we can get a copy of those
Yes.
links with the recording because they're very helpful. And I know I'm not copying and pasting them quick enough. So I also put in a link to stay in contact if you want to click on that and get on my email list. I do have several webinars coming up. I know we only have a few minutes left here, but I do have a webinar that's available on demand through the end of December, and it is exclusively on how to find grant funding sources using AI. And it's very much focused on Google Bard because I found that to be far more useful than some of the other platforms. And I can share that link with you as well. But to get into a couple of prompts, boy, I could spend a whole hour doing that. If you get on my website, grantsforgood.com, I do have a couple of blog posts. One of them is 5 prompts in 5 days. And I really like people to just explore one prompt and see what it will do. So to give you an example, you could put into your chat GPT prompt, you could add in, copy and paste a 3-page description of your grant proposal or your project and ask it to condense it to a 600-word abstract for a private foundation that is focused on health equity in New York City. And so that's a pretty valuable tool, is you're not plagiarizing because you've got your content. And we all know it's easier to write something longer than to try to condense something to 600 words or less. And as grant professionals, we've all run into those barriers where you are being asked to do tremendous things and describe them in 200 words or 6,000 characters. So AI can be helpful for assisting you with doing that, for example. It can be helpful for developing logic models, believe it or not, smart objectives, goals. I've added prompts to ask AI to develop smart objectives for, and then fill in the blanks for your project. So I know we're on the top of the hour now. So definitely get in my email list, check out my blog site, and I will share the list to the on-demand webinar if you're interested in an hour of learning for that. But in the meantime, I'm just so excited to see everybody here and definitely get out there and experiment with us. You'll be amazed. It's jaw-dropping.
And I thank you. And Philip, Grant Table has a lot of useful resources. I put some, you do a blog, but I just want to give you a chance also to say what's different about Grant Table, which is a feed. What the difference is between this and just like ChatGPT? I'm
This
giving
is
you
the
a minute to
infomercial part.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll be really quick. Basically, you can do some of what you can do in Grantable in ChatGPT, but you're doing a lot of copying and pasting, and you're still digging through all of your documents and whatever, and it's kind of a manual process. Grantable it's a smart content library. So anything you upload or anything you write automatically becomes part of your source material. And there's an AI that's helping to look through all of your content to pick your language to help write. So it's not generic. It's a little less hallucinating. I mean, very little. It doesn't really, because we're saying use your content to write this new answer. So that's one aspect. There's, of course, the AI grant writing assistant that generates content or revises things to shorten, lengthen, change tone. It's your writing partner. And then the most important thing that sometimes people overlook is the writing space. Like, we've created a really gorgeous word processing environment so that you, the person, are still able to type in conjunction with your AI assistant. So, if you're using ChatGPT to write a grant, at some point you've got to copy and paste it back into Word so that you can make the modification, or maybe you're going back and forth. We eliminate that need. So it's really about managing your data and then also utilizing AI in a really efficient way. So you can use it for free, or it's $24 a month for our standard tier. So we've tried to make it affordable. Equity is a big thing in my own story of how I came up with the tool. and trying to make grant funding more accessible to more organizations. And the last thing I'll say is, but for all the grant professionals out there, one of the things I hope we can talk about is how does adding AI to your profession allow you to serve more groups that previously didn't have access to your services? I think, we're no longer just writers, we're professionals helping with strategy, community building, relationship building. So just think more broadly, almost beyond the page, as much as we've talked about AI and the writing today.
Thank you. And last word, thank you so much, Afua. Last words from you. Anything you want to add?
I would just encourage people, as has been said, to play around with the tools. Start with small pilots so you can figure out both how they are used, but also what you and if you work within a wider organization or the clients that you're working for, what you're comfortable with, what those implications of those organizational values that I talked about a little earlier actually look like in practice. And then after developing the pilot and seeing what works for you and also what you're not comfortable with, then go full steam ahead into those tools. AI really can be a way to help streamline your time, your effort. It can be a way to unlock creativity for yourself. And it can just be a way to get things done, even with all of the risks that we discussed.
Thank you so much, everybody. This was a fast hour. I want to encourage you. Margit's website has a lot of resources about how to do more with AI. Philip's Grantable. I've learned a lot. He has a webinar on how to get started. So I hope those are useful resources for you. And if please fill out the survey when I send it. And if you want another session on AI or a follow-up, or if you want to, again, join the program committee and have more say in all of our programs, we'd so love to have more of you involved. Am I forgetting anything? Co-president, am I forgetting anything? All right.
I don't think so. I think you've done a masterful job, and so have the presenters.
So
I think another session could be great. Thank you.
Let's thank our presenters so very, very, very much with great gratitude, and I hope everybody has a marvelous afternoon.
Grant Connections call, Allison.
Wednesday is the Impact 100 Grant Connections call is Thursday, December 14th at 8:30. And then our next session, Jeffrey Winthal is doing a session with Maria Dautruche in the intersection of grant writing and DEI, January 10th. So that's also going to be really, really good. We had the most wonderful, robust conversation, and that's going to be great too. So happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy whatever you celebrate. Best wishes, good health to you all. Thank you.
Great to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Steve, how did we do? You're muted. Muted.
Unmute. I thought it was wonderful. I mean, really helpful. But of course it led to more questions. So I just reached out to Philip to see if we could chat directly. I think that application is the critical issue for our field. It's all so Margit, sorry, started to touch on some of those things, and I thought those were critically important. But of course, then I wanted, for instance, she said, I asked it to do an LOI, but how does it know what an LOI is before you ask the question? So I get the sense that you have to feed it content, so that it then recognizes the patterns in how an LOI is built.
But it's learned that by now, generative AI now knows you can say, I'm writing a grant.
Okay.
And then you give it information. And Margaret's website has a lot of these prompts, and also the Grantable, he has like a little course.
I saw that. And from my standpoint, I would feel more comfortable. Again, I'm of a certain age and comfort level with technology, which isn't a lot. Thankfully, I have people who help me understand and utilize technology better than I normally could. But if I get into this, I want to do it in the right way, the ethical way. And I'm almost thinking that the closed system afforded by Grant Table is more appropriate, because then it's learning from past grants we've done.
Yeah.
Right? It's taking those patterns and then we're replicating our own words. We're not taking from, the universe. So I don't know if that just gives me a greater comfort level than utilizing Chat GPT. So
You could try it, and what I've seen, like I've it
I
can.
gotta go, sorry.
Oh,
bye.
I'm sorry, you guys had
Bye.
things to talk about.
Well, I'll just
No, it's really.
No,
Do
go
we?
ahead and
Do you-
drive. You're driving. I'll just finish telling Steve what I was about to say,
Okay,
Okay.
no problem.
which is
Fine.
that I do think it's good for brainstorming. Things
Right.
like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of, that.
Right.
So, and I guess that would happen within Grantable, but I know it happens within like a Chat GPT. So,
Right. Okay. So it draws on, a million other LOIs or
Right.
answers to this question or that question, and then might kickstart your brain a little bit
yeah.
when it's
All right.
foggy.
My sister's calling. Her husband's in the hospital, so I'm going to
Oh,
take
geez,
this.
sorry.
All right.
Thanks,
you.
Allison. Thanks so
Okay.
much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi.